Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kate and today I'm going to be teaching you how to create this easy watercolor fox. Let's get started. So before we start our painting, we first are going to draw out our fox. So I'm just going to start with a very light circle. And I'm doing this first in my sketchbook so that I could just transfer it onto my watercolor paper and I don't have to worry about all the times I'm going to erase my lines. And so now that we have our base circle, I'm going to come off over here and create like a little curved out area, and I'm going to curve it back in to create the little fuzzy cheek area of our sleeping fox. And then I'm going to bring down a little point for his nose, and that's going to come back up into another curved out area for his cheek, and then we're going to curve that back up, kind of show his head. So curve and then come down, just like that. And then I'm going to create a little ear. Foxes have pretty big ears, so just kind of curving up to a point and then curving back down. And then I'm going to repeat the same thing on the inside. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here, and it's going to come off the side like that. I'm going to give him a tiny little circle for a nose, little sleepy eyes. And then over here, I'm going to bring the tail down, and it's going to swoop up underneath his resting face, and then just carry it kind of up. Make it into a big wispy tail. And we're actually going to bring it farther over here, so his entire face is resting on it. So you can make it as big and as bushy as you'd like. And again, this is just my sketchbook, so it's okay if your sketch looks a little rough at this point, because you can figure out all of the small details and then smooth it out and then transfer it onto your watercolor paper. And then now, from where this part of the tail and the body meet, we're just going to come over just a little bit, and we're going to create a curve down for the fox's leg. And then I'm just going to soften up the top part of the body, make it a little less bold. And then I'm going to fix my ears a little bit. I think they look a little strange. Like that. Right, and there you have a nice rough outline of our sleeping fox. And then we are going to transfer this onto our watercolor paper just by putting some pencil on the back and then just literally tracing over onto the watercolor paper. And then we can get painting. So now that we have our fox traced onto our watercolor paper, I'm just going to show you what I did to add some other background lines just to give us some guidance. So all I did was I drew a curved line coming behind my fox just to give the base, the foreground of where he's sleeping. And then we have a very wavy line leaning upward toward the right to create a mountain. It comes to a point and then it just comes off the page. So we have our mountain in the background, and then we have our fox in the foreground. And yeah, now we can begin painting. We are now going to start by filling up our sky with clean water. So just take a flat brush and just start filling everywhere above the mountain with clean water. All right, and then once that is wet, I've already mixed up some cobalt blue and some Payne's gray. I have a lot more blue than gray in here. And I'm just gonna start tapping in that blue color. And I'm gonna leave a couple spaces clean, just so that I have the appearance of some clouds. So just start filling that space in. And then again, just leave some space white for the clouds to just kind of blend in there. I'm going to be careful working up my mountain line. Just like that. And I'm going to clean my brush off. And then I just want it to be damp. And I'm going to blend into those white spaces. Just to kind of blend everything out. And it may not have it's going to have more of less of a super white cloud feel and just kind of a glaze of different textures. Just because my paper dried very quickly. Just kind of blend it all in, get a nice blue sky with some white areas. All right, and then we are good to go. We are gonna let this dry, and then we're gonna move on to our mountain. For this next step, we are gonna use some white watercolor paint straight out of the tube. And we are going to mix this with just a little bit of Payne's gray. And it's going to be the top of our mountain, and then we're going to blend it into some black. So if you have already seen my igloo painting, you know exactly how I did this in the previous video. So I'll have that linked below just in case you want to go check that out. But other than that, it's very simple. So we're just going to use that white watercolor paint. I'm going to take just a little bit of Payne's gray. So straight out of the tube, it's going to be the thickest and most opaque form of watercolor paint that we can get. And we are just going to apply that right along the top of our mountain peak. So I'm just adding a little bit more water to it, to help it move. So again, just a little bit of Payne's gray just to give it an off-white feel, because our fox is sleeping in the daytime. Just gonna work our way up that mountain. Just kind of bring it down, keeping it like at a point. I'm not going back and forth. I'm starting at that peak and I'm bringing it down. It's okay if things are a little rough because a mountain isn't perfectly smooth. It has a lot of texture to it. So now I'm going to go into my black without cleaning my brush. And then I'm just going to start pulling that black into it and just blending it out at the top. I'm going to get some more water on my brush. Just going to blend that down. I do want to be careful to avoid my fox, so I'm just going to kind of carefully go around him real quick. Another thing you can do when you're afraid of like painting into something, you can use masking fluid. Just by painting masking fluid over whatever you want to keep white will protect it from a layer of paint. And then once that layer dries, you can pull that masking fluid off. And then you have a nice clean image to work with. And then it goes a lot quicker rather than taking a really long time to be careful to paint around a picture. Especially with watercolor, when you want to work quickly, masking fluid can be very helpful. Alright, so I'm just going to continue going around and tucking that black behind this foreground area. I'm just going to re-blend out where I started with the fox so it doesn't look too sharp. Just get a little bit more black on my brush. Just going to blend this up. Then don't worry, we're going to fix at the top where it looks like it's not blending together. So once again, just have that kind of leading upwards toward the tip. You don't want it like going back and forth, you just want it all to kind of going one direction together. Alright, just like that with our black paint. Took a little bit longer just because we're trying to avoid our fox. So now I'm going into my white and gray paint again, and I'm going to start at the tip, and I'm just going to blend that together, just like that. Just kind of pulling it down and just letting it blend into that black paint. And you want to do that all the way down this line, you want it to be seamless and all nice and blended, no sharp lines. So just bring it up like that. And then I'm going to clean my brush real quick just to get some fresh gray paint. And then I'm just going to blend up here again. And then I'm just going to get a little bit more of that black. And just continue blending until you are happy with your end result. And I'm just doing a little bit more black. right, and there we have our mountain. We need to let this completely dry before we move on to our fox and our foreground. Before we paint our fox, we are actually going to paint around our fox. So I'm going to take some clean water on my brush and I'm going to fill up the entire area around him. And we are just going to take some time to add our shadows before we actually paint him in. So he's going to be sleeping on snow, and then later on we're going to add some grass that's going to be popping through the snow. So I'm going to take just a little bit of that sky color that we used, and I'm just going to drop that in all around where he's sleeping. And then I'm just going to blend that out into the white area. And then I'm just going to take a little bit more of that pigment because I want it to be darker right around the base of him in the front, just to show some deeper shadows. Put a little bit of that darker blue back here. And then just going to let that blend out. I'm going to take a little bit more of that blue. And I'm just going to blend this out. Again, just to give our foreground some shadowing. Just like that. I'm going to drop a little bit more of that blue in. All right, and there we have our snowy shadows. So we're going to let this dry, and then we're going to come back and add our fox and add our little grass patches that are going to be popping out of the snow. All right, so now we're going to begin painting in our fox. So for this, I'm using my round brush, and we're going to be using the tip of it for the most part. To start though, we are going to fill up our entire drawing of our fox with some clean water. Just a nice light glaze. All right, and the key to doing our fox is we want to leave some white space and not fill him up completely. So we are going to start with his face, and we're just going to start painting in some loose lines. I'm using Payne's Gray, not Payne's Gray, I'm sorry. I'm using Burnt Sienna. I'm just going to tap in, so you see how it's moving with the water. I'm going to leave the middle of the ears as white as I can. I'm just going to fill in the rest of him. with that burnt sienna color. So right now we're just letting all these areas blend. I'm gonna clean my brush off, just sop up down the middle of his nose. So it still has a tint of that color, but for the most part it's pretty clean. So we're just starting out pretty light because it's always easier to come back with more orange than to try to pull and take some away. I'm gonna come down here. And I want to leave a more jagged look on the tail. And then I'm just going to grab this where it bled a little bit and just kind of blend it out. All right, and that is the first layer of our fox. We're going to let this dry and then we're going to come back in with a second coat. So now we're just going to give him some final details. So I'm going to take that same burnt sienna paint. I'm just going to add a little bit more paint to it to make it a little bit thicker. I'm going to dab off any extra water and paint off my brush. And then with the tip of my brush, we're going to start on the tail. I'm just going to start flicking in some darker tones. And this is going to be wet on dry because I do not want everything to bleed together. Come up around like this, and then we're going to grab some dark pigment and we're going to outline his leg. Kind of outline almost all of him with this darker paint. Just add those texture lines. This is just to kind of make him look like he has some fluffy hair and he's not just flat. I'm going to go back into that paint mixture. Just continue adding those little fur lines. In some areas, I'm going to blend it out around the leg. And around the tail, I'm going to blend it out. I'm going to blend these lines out together too. So I'm kind of going away from all that texture I was talking about. So I just do not like how it was looking. So I haven't done anything to the face yet. We're just still working on that on the tail. So now I'm going into that white watercolor paint that I got out of the tube. Just going to add that to the tip. And this is not going to stay pure white. I want it to blend into that orange. And it's pretty watered down, so you can even use any white watercolor that you have already in your pans, if that's the type of watercolor that you're using. And I'm just going to blend that throughout the tail. I'm going to continue that up with the leg. I really like how smooth adding that white watercolor is making him look. So I'm just taking what's left on my brush and I'm blending that up into the rest of the body. So you can tell how the body area is a little bit lighter than the leg, but we still have that shadow line to give a good separation between the two. And then I'm going to go back into that darker mixture of paint of burnt sienna. I'm just going to shape out his ears. And do that over here as well. So just using the tip of my brush. And then I'm just going to do quick little lines for the little hair in his ears. And then I'm going to add some little lines kind of coming down into his cheeks from the ears. Do the same thing over here. Almost dry brushing in this section. So not a lot of water on my brush. And I'm going to take just a little bit of that white watercolor paint and mix it with that orange paint color. And then I'm going to blend out these quick lines. Very gently going behind his ears because I want the ears to stay prominent. And I want the middle of his nose to stay pretty light. So we're going to blend. We're going to just clean our brush. So with a very damp, lightly damp brush, we're just going to blend. So there's no harsh line, but that middle still stays pretty light. And we're going to do the same thing up here. We're just going to blend. All right, and so there we have one more layer. We need to let this dry before we can finish him off completely. So now we are going to finish off our fox and add some little bit of grass around him. So I switched to my small detail brush and I'm first going to just sharpen up some of the fox's outlined areas using the burnt sienna paint. So my fox has completely dried, so once again this is going to be wet on dry. I'm just going to re-go over the outer outline with this paint. Give him those little hair in the ear again that kind of dried and blended. I'm going to get a little bit darker paint for inside the body. I'm just going to kind of go up his cheek and down. Again, just to sharpen up these details just a little bit. Add some quick lines through the tail and the leg right there. All right, and then I'm going to switch to a really thick mixture of Payne's Gray. I'm doing this on the tip of my small detail brush, and we are just going to give him a tiny little nose. And some little eyes. Just like that. All right, and then I'm going to go into a green paint mixture. So this is black and sage green. And I'm just going to add some really quick grass lines right next to my fox. And I'm going to clean my brush off, and with clean water, just going to grab that paint to kind of create a shadow of where it's coming out. I'm going to do another one over here. So just quick little line motions, just popping out of the snow. Clean my brush off, and then with some clean water, I'm just going to pull that paint off of those, add a little bit more just because it's pretty light, just to give some shadow of where it's popping out. I'm going to add a couple more strands of grass. That one. All right, and I think I'll do just one more right behind him. And then the same thing, just some damp water. A little bit more. And just blend that out. All right. And there you have an easy watercolor fox. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed painting with me today and found this tutorial helpful. If you did, please subscribe to this channel and give this video a thumbs up. If you'd like any extra details on this painting, head over to my blog, Reflecting Creation. I'll have a link in the description box below. Hope to see you again soon. Bye.